I looked down at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in her nursery, her chest rising and falling in that perfect, rhythmic way that only babies have. For 2 years, I've whispered her name, a name I thought was our little secret, a name that felt like the very first gift we ever gave her, and felt a warmth I couldn't describe. It was the name we'd chosen together, the one that supposedly just clicked during a rainy drive home from my 20-week ultrasound. But as I stood there in the dim glow of the nightlight, the name felt heavy in my mouth. It felt sour. Because I had just realized that the name I called my child every single day wasn't a symbol of our new beginning. It was a recycled promise, a ghost from a past I wasn't a part of, and a name he had already shared with a woman who came before me. How do you look at your child the same way when you realize her identity was a plan your husband made with someone else? Was our most intimate decision as parents just the repeat performance of a life he tried to build with another woman? I never thought I was the jealous type. I've always been the person who says everyone has a past, and that's what made them who they are today. I believed that. I really did. When I met Mark, he was everything I had ever imagined a partner could be. He was steady, he was kind, and he had this way of looking at me that made me feel like the only person in the room. Our relationship moved at that beautiful whirlwind pace where everything just felt right. We didn't have to force anything. By the time we got engaged, I felt like I knew every corner of his heart. Or at least, I thought I did. We used to spend hours talking about our future, the house we'd buy, the trips we'd take, and of course, the family we wanted to start. When I finally got pregnant, the excitement was overwhelming. But then came the pressure of the name. It's a huge responsibility, right? You're literally labeling a human being for the rest of their life. We went through the books, the websites, the family trees. Nothing felt right. Everything felt too common, or too trendy, or just not her. And then, one afternoon, we were sitting on the porch, the sun setting behind the trees, and Mark just looked at me and said, "What about Clara?" The moment he said it, I felt this literal spark in my chest. Clara. It sounded classic but fresh. It sounded strong. I looked at him and his eyes were shining, and he said, "I've just always thought it was the most beautiful name. I can just see a little girl named Clara running around this yard." I remember crying, blame the hormones, and hugging him, thinking we had finally found it. We had found the one thing that was uniquely ours. For the rest of the pregnancy, she was Clara. We bought the monogrammed blankets, we painted the wooden letters for her wall, and when she was finally born and the doctor asked for her name, we said it in unison. It was our lightning bolt moment. Or so I thought. Fast forward 2 years. Life is good. We're in the thick of toddlerhood, which is exhausting but beautiful. We were sitting in the kitchen the other night, just finished with dinner, sharing a bottle of wine while Clara was finally down for the count. We were just talking, drifting through random topics, when we started reminiscing about our firsts. Somehow, the conversation turned to names. Not just Clara's, but names in general. I mentioned a name I'd liked as a teenager, but realized was terrible now, and we were laughing about it. Then, I said something like, "I'm still so glad we landed on Clara. It's so funny how it just came to you that day on the porch." Mark took a sip of his wine, looking relaxed, and said, "Yeah, I've actually always loved that name. It's funny, actually. One of the girls I hooked up with back in college was named Clara. I remember thinking even then, man, this is a great name." I froze. The glass in my hand felt suddenly very fragile. I tried to keep my voice light, like it was just a casual observation. "Oh? I didn't know you knew a Clara back then." He nodded, totally unfazed, clearly not realizing the internal sirens going off in my head. "Yeah, just a short thing, nothing serious. But the name stuck with me. In fact," he paused, swirling his wine, "I remember telling Sarah, you remember my ex Sarah, that if we ever had a daughter, I'd want to name her Clara. She loved it too. We actually talked about it quite a bit. The silence that followed was deafening to me, though he didn't seem to notice it. The room felt like it had shifted an inch to the left. Everything looked the same, but the foundation was cracked. I felt this cold, sinking sensation in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just that he had slept with someone with that name. Like I said, I know he had a life before me. It was the fact that for 2 years, I believed we had discovered this name together. I believed it was a fresh, beautiful choice that represented us. But to him, it wasn't new. It was a name he had associated with a casual hookup, and then pre-planned with a long-term ex-girlfriend. It felt like I was living in a house he had already designed with someone else, and I was just the one who happened to be there when the construction was finished. I looked at him, and for the first time in our marriage, he felt like a stranger. He was sitting there, smiling, totally unaware that he had just dismantled the most precious memory I had of our daughter's beginning. I tried to process it. I told myself I was being irrational. It's just a name, I whispered to myself in my head. He said he's loved the name since he was a kid. It's not about the women, it's about the name. But the logic wouldn't stick. Because if he loved the name so much, why didn't he tell me? Why did he let me believe it was something we found together? Why did he let me feel that lightning bolt moment on the porch without mentioning, by the way, I've suggested this to every woman I've been serious with? The more I thought about it, the more I started to spiral. I started thinking about his ex, Sarah. They were together for 3 years. Did they pick out nursery themes for a Clara? Did they imagine her face? Did they have the same conversations we had? And then there was the hookup. Somewhere out there is a woman named Clara who probably knows Mark. If she ever sees a picture of our daughter on social media or hears her name, does she think, oh, he named his kid after me? I know it sounds insecure. I know it sounds like I'm looking for a problem where there isn't one. But it felt like a betrayal of our intimacy. It felt like he had taken a piece of our story and revealed it was actually a sequel to a story he'd started years ago. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, barely hearing him talk about his day. When we finally went to bed, I laid there, staring at the ceiling, the name Clara echoing in my head over and over, until it didn't even sound like my daughter's name anymore. It sounded like a label for a mistake. The next morning, the anger started to set in. I realized I wasn't just sad, I was mad. I was mad that he was so casual about it. I was mad that he didn't see why it would hurt me. And mostly, I was mad that he had robbed me of the specialness of my daughter's name. Every time I call her now, am I going to think about Sarah? Am I going to think about a random girl from his college days? The sun came up the next morning, just like it always does. But the light hitting the kitchen floor felt different. It felt colder. I watched Mark pouring his coffee, whistling a tune, completely oblivious to the fact that he had detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of my heart the night before. To him, it was just a fun fact, a little piece of trivia about his past that he'd tossed out over a glass of Merlot. To me, it was the moment I realized the foundation of our most sacred family decision was built on recycled parts. "Morning, beautiful," he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I stiffened. I couldn't help it. The physical contact felt wrong, like I was being touched by a stranger who happened to be wearing my husband's face. He didn't seem to notice the tension in my shoulders or the way I was gripping my mug until my knuckles turned white. He just grabbed his toast and headed toward the living room to play with Clara. "Hey there, Clara Bear. Who's my favorite girl?" he cooed. Hearing him say her name, that name, made my stomach turn. Every time the syllables Clara left his lips, I didn't see our daughter. I saw a montage of his past. I saw a college girl I'd never met. I saw Sarah, the woman who had shared his bed and his dreams for 3 years before I even entered the picture. I imagined them lying in their own bed, years ago, whispering about a future that never happened. "We'll have a little girl," he probably told her, "and we'll name her Clara." The betrayal wasn't just in the name itself. It was in the performance. For 2 years, I had cherished the memory of that day on the porch. I had held on to it as this lightning bolt moment where we were so in sync, so connected, that the perfect name just manifested out of the ether. But now I realized there was no lightning bolt. There was just a script. He had a script for a perfect life, and he'd been trying to cast someone in the role of mother to a girl named Clara for a decade. I wasn't his partner in a new discovery. I was the one who finally made the plan work. I spent the day in a fog. I tried to do the laundry, but I'd stop halfway through folding one of her little onesies, staring at the name embroidered on the pocket. Clara. It looked different now. It looked like a second-hand garment that had been tailored to fit me, but still smelled like someone else's perfume. The insecurity I felt wasn't about Mark wanting to be with those other women. I knew he loved me. I knew he was committed to our family. But there's a specific kind of pain that comes with realizing you're not the first person to share a special dream with your partner. It's the realization that your unique bond might just be a standard template he uses. If the name wasn't special to us, then what else wasn't? Were our wedding vows recycled? Did he tell Sarah the same things he tells me when we're falling asleep? By the time Mark got home from work that evening, the pressure in my chest was unbearable. I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I waited until Clara was down for her nap, the house finally quiet, before I sat him down at the kitchen table. Mark, we need to talk about what you said last night, I started, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. He looked genuinely confused. He set his keys down and tilted his head. Last night? About the wine? Or, wait, about the name thing? The name thing, I said, my voice gaining a bit of an edge. You acted like it was nothing, like it was just a coincidence. But Mark, you told me that name came to you on the porch. You told me it was something you just always thought was beautiful. You never mentioned that you'd already picked it out with your ex-girlfriend. You never mentioned it was the name of someone you'd slept with. Mark sighed, that long, here we go kind of sigh that usually makes my blood boil. He rubbed his face with his hands. Honey, I told you, I've liked the name since I was a kid. I think I saw it in a book or a movie or something when I was 10. It's just a name I've always had in the back of my head. Yes, I mentioned it to Sarah because I liked it back then too. And yes, the girl in college had that name. But that was just a coincidence. I didn't pick the name because of her. If anything, I liked the girl because I liked the name. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal to me, I snapped, the volume of my voice rising. Because I thought we chose it together. I thought it was our thing. I feel like I've been living a lie for 2 years. Every time I say her name, I'm going to think about you and Sarah planning your life together. I'm going to think about some random girl from your past. How can you not see how that would hurt me? You're being irrational, he said. And that was the spark that set the whole thing off. It's been 2 years. She is Clara. You can't just change how you feel about your own daughter's name because of something that happened before you even knew me. My past didn't disappear the day I met you, and I'm allowed to have liked things before you came along. It's not about the past, Mark. It's about the honesty. I was standing up now, pacing the small space of the kitchen. You let me believe a certain narrative. You let me believe in this beautiful, romantic moment where we found her name. You let me put that name on her birth certificate without telling me it was already tainted for you. And what about them? What if Sarah sees her? What if that other Clara sees her? They're going to think you named your child after a memory of them. I hate that. I hate that they have any claim, however small, on our daughter's identity. Mark stood up too, his face flushing red. They don't have a claim. No one has a claim but us. You are her mother. I am her father. The name is just a collection of letters that I happen to think sounds pretty. Why are you letting people who aren't even in our lives anymore have this much power over you? It's just your insecurity talking, and it's honestly kind of insulting that you think I'd name my daughter after a hookup. Then why didn't you tell me? I whispered, the anger suddenly giving way to a hollow, aching sadness. If it was so innocent, why keep it a secret for years? Why wait until now to drop it like it's a joke? He didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there, looking at me like I was a problem he didn't know how to solve. And in that moment, I realized the divide between us was wider than I'd ever imagined. He saw a name as a label. I saw it as a soul. He saw the past as a closed book. I saw it as the ink that was still bleeding into our present. I walked out of the kitchen and went into the nursery. I sat in the rocking chair in the dark, listening to the soft, rhythmic breathing of the little girl I loved more than life itself. I looked at her small, perfect hands, and I tried to find the Clara I knew before last night. But she felt far away. It was like I was looking at her through a frosted window. I felt a sudden, terrifying urge to call her something else. Anything else. Just to see if it would stick. Just to see if I could reclaim her for myself. But you can't just rename a 2-year-old. You can't just erase 2 years of memories. 2 years of Clara's first steps and Clara's first word. I was trapped. I was trapped in a life that felt like it had been ghostwritten by his exes, and I didn't know how to write my own ending. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and cold silences. I tried to go back to being the fun mom, the supportive wife, but every time I looked at my daughter, I didn't just see her. I saw the shadow of Sarah. I saw the ghost of a college girl I'd never even met. It's funny how a single piece of information can act like a drop of ink in a glass of clear water. It starts small, just a little swirl, but before you know it, the whole thing is dark and murky. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. I started doing what I promised myself I'd never do. I went down the rabbit hole. It was late. One of those nights where sleep feels like a country you're barred from entering. Mark was snoring softly beside me, his breathing deep and untroubled. I hated how easily he could sleep, while my brain was a hamster on a wheel of what ifs and why did he's. I grabbed my phone, the screen light stinging my eyes in the dark room, and I went to Facebook. I knew Sarah's last name. I'd heard it mentioned a few times over the years in passing. Old college stories, mostly harmless stuff. It took me less than 30 seconds to find her. Her profile wasn't private. I felt like a criminal, my heart hammering against my ribs as I scrolled through her photos. She was beautiful, in that effortless, cool girl kind of way. I scrolled back, deeper and deeper, until I found what I was looking for. Photos from 7, 8 years ago. Mark was in them. There they were, at a music festival, laughing. There they were, at a friend's wedding, looking like the golden couple. And then I saw a post from 2016. It was just a simple status update from Sarah. Spending the rainy afternoon dreaming about the future. House in the country, 2 golden retrievers, and a little girl named Clara. Life is good. I felt the air leave my lungs. Mark had told me it was his childhood favorite name. He told me it was a coincidence. But there it was, in black and white, written by a woman who wasn't me, years before I even existed in his world. It wasn't just a name he liked. It was a brand. It was a vision of a life he had been trying to build long before he met me. I wasn't the co-architect of our life. I was the contractor hired to finish a project someone else started. I looked at Mark's sleeping face and felt a surge of genuine, hot resentment. How many other things in our life were leftovers? Was this house we bought, the one with the big porch, something they'd talked about? Was the way he made his coffee a habit he'd picked up from her? I felt like a replacement part in a machine I didn't understand. The next morning, the name Clara felt like ash in my mouth. "Clara, honey, finish your peas," I said at lunch. Every syllable felt like a betrayal. I looked at her, and for a split second, I didn't see my daughter. I saw Mark's dream. I saw the version of this child he had imagined with Sarah. I think the worst part was the realization that Mark probably didn't even think he was lying. To him, names are just labels. But to me, a name is an identity. It's the very first story we tell about a person. And he had given our daughter a story that belonged to someone else. I tried to talk to my best friend Jenna about it. We went for coffee while the kids were at preschool. I told her everything. The hookup, the ex-girlfriend, the Facebook post. I expected her to be outraged on my behalf. Instead, She just looked at me with this pitying expression. "Honey," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "It's a name, a beautiful name. Mark chose it with you because he loves it, and he loves you. Does it really matter who else he talked about it with? Every man has a past. If you dig deep enough, you're going to find something you don't like. Stop digging." "But it's her name, Jenna," I argued, my voice cracking. "It's not like a favorite sweater or a movie he likes. It's our daughter's soul. And he let me believe it was something special between us. He lied by omission for 3 years." "He didn't lie," she countered. "He just didn't think it was relevant. Men don't process things the way we do. To him, the name is Clara because it's a good name. The fact that he liked it 10 years ago doesn't change the fact that he loves the Clara sitting in that high chair right now." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But every time I saw a notification on my phone or a people you may know suggestion on social media, I panicked. I became obsessed with the idea that the other Clara, the college hookup, would somehow find out. I imagined her sitting in a bar with her friends, laughing, saying, "Oh, did you hear? Mark from college named his kid after me. Guess he never really got over it." The thought made me physically ill. I felt small. I felt like a footnote in Mark's grand romantic history. Things at home were getting worse. Mark could sense my withdrawal. He tried to be extra attentive, bringing me flowers, offering to take the night shift with Clara, but it only made me more suspicious. Was he being nice because he felt guilty? Or was he being nice because he thought I was crazy and needed to be handled with kid gloves? "What is it going to take for you to move past this?" he asked one night, his voice filled with exhaustion. We were standing in the hallway, the light from the nursery spilling out onto the carpet. "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my eyes burning. I look at her and I see Sarah's Facebook post. I see a name that you've used with other women. I feel like I'm wearing a wedding dress that was originally bought for someone else. "That is so unfair," Mark snapped. "I am here. I am married to you. We have a child together. Why are you letting a woman I haven't spoken to in nearly a decade ruin our family? Do you want to change her name? Is that what this is about? You want to go to the courthouse and tell a judge we want to rename our 2-year-old because I liked the name before I met you?" "I don't know what I want," I yelled back, tears finally spilling over. "I just want it to be ours. I want her name to belong to us, not to your history book." The look he gave me then, it wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was disappointment. He looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize anymore. He turned around and walked into the guest room, shutting the door quietly behind him. I stood there in the dark hallway, alone. I looked at the closed door, and then I looked at the nursery door. I felt like I was losing everything. My husband, my peace of mind, and even the connection I had to my daughter's name. I felt like I was drowning in a past that didn't even belong to me. And then I did something even worse. I went back to the Facebook profile. I looked at Sarah's most recent photos. She was married now. She had a little boy. And then I saw a comment on one of her photos from a mutual friend of theirs. "So happy for you, Sarah. You finally got that life you always talked about." Sarah replied, "Almost all of it. Still wish I could have used my favorite girl name, but my husband hated it. He said Clara sounded too old-fashioned." I dropped my phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor, the screen cracking right across the middle. She wanted it. She still wanted it. And Mark had given it to me instead. Was it a tribute to her? A way to keep a piece of her alive in his life? Or was it just a coincidence that he won the argument with me, that he lost with her? Every answer felt like a trap. Every thought felt like a betrayal. I realized then that I wasn't just mad at Mark. I was mourning. I was mourning the version of my life where I was the only woman who mattered. I was mourning the lightning bolt on the porch. And I didn't know how to stop the grief from turning into hate. The crack across my phone screen looked like a jagged lightning bolt, splitting Sarah's comment in two. It felt poetic in a sick sort of way. My digital window into the past was literally fractured, mirroring the way my reality had just splintered. I sat on the floor of the hallway for a long time, the cold wood seeping into my skin, staring at that broken screen. Still wish I could have used my favorite girl name. Those words were burned into my retinas. She wanted it. She still wanted it. The narrative Mark had given me, that it was just a name he'd liked since he was 10, felt like a flimsy paper shield against a torrential downpour. If it was just a childhood favorite, why was it so central to his 3-year relationship with Sarah? Why was it the name she still mourned losing out on? It wasn't just a name to them. It was a flag they had planted in the soil of their future. And when that future crumbled, Mark just took the flag and brought it to me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. I saw Mark and Sarah, younger, idealistic, sitting in a coffee shop or lying in a park, mapping out a life that looked exactly like the one I was currently living. It made me feel like an understudy who had finally been called up to the main stage because the lead actress walked out. I was wearing her costumes, speaking her lines, and raising the child she had already named. The next morning, the normalcy of our routine felt like a physical assault. Mark was in the kitchen making pancakes. The smell of maple syrup, which usually felt like home, made me want to gag. Clara was in her high chair, banging a plastic spoon against the tray, her little face bright and expectant. "Hey, you're up," Mark said, his voice cautious. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign that the storm had passed. "I made blueberry, your favorite." I looked at the pancakes and then at him. I saw her face bookmark. He stopped flipping a pancake midair. The sizzle of the griddle seemed to grow louder in the silence. "You did what?" I looked up Sarah. I saw a post from years ago where she talked about her future daughter, Clara. And I saw a comment from last month where she said she still wishes she could have used that name. I felt my voice trembling, but I didn't stop. "You told me it was a childhood favorite. You told me it was a coincidence. But it was her favorite name, Mark. You didn't just like it. You adopted her dream and sold it to me as our own." Mark turned off the stove. He set the spatula down with a deliberate, slow precision that scared me more than if he'd thrown it. "You're stalking my ex-girlfriend from nearly a decade ago, and you're using her social media posts to indict our marriage. Do you hear how insane that sounds?" "Don't you dare call me insane," I shouted. Clara started to whimper, the tension in the room finally reaching her. I took a deep breath, trying to lower my voice for her sake, but the fire in my chest wouldn't go out. "I'm not indicting our marriage. I'm asking for the truth. Why couldn't you just tell me? Why let me live in a fantasy where we discovered that name together on the porch? Why let me be the one who fulfilled a promise you made to another woman?" "It wasn't a promise to her." Mark stepped toward me, his hands outspread in a gesture of frustration. "It's a name, Emily. A name I happen to love. Yes, Sarah loved it too. We talked about it. So what? Does that mean the name is retired forever? Does that mean I'm never allowed to use a name I like because someone I used to date liked it too? That's not how life works. You're acting like I'm a criminal for having a history. It's the erasure of me that hurts, Mark. You didn't say, 'Hey, I've always loved the name Clara, and I even talked about it with an ex, but I'd love for it to be our daughter's name.' You let me think it was ours. You let me think I was the one who made it special for you. You let me believe in a lie of omission for 3 years." He looked at me for a long time, his expression hardening. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react exactly like this. I knew you'd turn it into a drama. I wanted our daughter's name to be untainted by my past, so I kept the past where it belongs, in the past. You're the one who dragged it into the kitchen this morning. You're the one who's tainting it." He walked past me, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. "I can't do this. I have to go to work. We'll talk when you've had a chance to calm down and realize how ridiculous this is." The sound of the front door slamming felt like a physical blow. I stood there, alone in the kitchen with a plate of cooling pancakes and a crying toddler. I picked Clara up, holding her close, burying my face in her hair. She smelled like baby shampoo and innocence. She didn't know her name was a battlefield. She didn't know she was carrying the weight of her father's history on her tiny shoulders. I spent the afternoon at the park, sitting on a bench while Clara played in the sandbox. I watched the other moms, laughing and chatting, and I wondered if they had secrets like this. I wondered if their lives were built on the foundations of someone else's blueprints. I found myself looking at Clara and trying out other names in my head. Elena, Sophie, Maya. Names that were clean. Names that didn't have Sarah's fingerprints all over them. But they didn't fit. She was Clara. The name had settled into her bones over the last 2 years. Every time she laughed, every time she tripped and looked to me for comfort, she was Clara. Mark was right about one thing. I couldn't change her name. But I didn't know if I could ever say it again without feeling that sharp, bitter sting of being second best. I started thinking about the hookup Clara too, the girl from college. Mark had been so casual about her. I remember thinking even then, man, this is a great name. It felt like he was a collector, and Clara was the rare coin he'd been trying to find a permanent display case for. First it was the hookup, then it was Sarah, and finally it was me. I was just the one who finally said yes to the display case. I felt a wave of nausea. Was our whole relationship like this? Was our wedding venue the place he'd imagined taking someone else? Was my engagement ring a style he'd scouted out years ago? The trust hadn't just cracked, it had disintegrated. I realized that the issue wasn't the name anymore. It was the realization that I didn't really know where Mark ended and his past began. He was a mosaic of old dreams and recycled intentions, and I was just the person tasked with holding it all together. When evening came, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. I was exhausted from the mental gymnastics of trying to justify his choices. I realized I couldn't keep living in this state of hypervigilance, checking social media and analyzing every word he said. But I also knew I couldn't just let it go like he wanted me to. You can't unring a bell. Mark came home late, looking sheepish. He brought more flowers, roses this time. He tried to hug me, and I let him, but I felt like a statue in his arms. "I'm sorry I walked out," he whispered into my hair. I hate seeing you upset over something that I truly believe is a non-issue. I love you, Emily. You're my wife. Clara is our daughter. That's all that matters. "I want to believe that, Mark," I said, pulling back to look him in the eyes. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't about me being insecure or crazy. This is about the fact that you took away my right to make a fully informed choice about our daughter's identity. You prioritized your childhood favorite name over my peace of mind. You chose a label over our shared history. And I don't know how to look at you the same way, knowing you're capable of that kind of calculation." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw something in my face that stopped him. For the first time, he looked actually worried. "What do we do then?" he asked, his voice small. "How do we fix this?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think we need to start by admitting that this isn't just my problem. This is our problem. And you need to stop telling me I'm being irrational for being hurt by your dishonesty." That night, we slept in the same bed, but there was a vast invisible canyon between us. I lay there listening to the wind outside, thinking about all the Claras in the world. I thought about the Clara who was my daughter, and I wondered if she'd ever know the story of her name. I wondered if she'd ever feel like she was a replacement, or if she'd be strong enough to make the name her own. I realized then that I had a choice. I could let the name Clara belong to Sarah and the past, or I could fight to reclaim it for the present. But reclaiming it meant I had to face a hard truth. The man I married wasn't the person I thought he was. He was more complicated, more flawed, and much more secretive. And I had to decide if I loved the real Mark enough to live with the ghosts he brought into our nursery. The days that followed felt like a slow-motion car crash. You know that feeling when you're watching something terrible happen, and you want to look away, but you're paralyzed? That's what walking through my own house felt like. Mark was trying. He really was. He was being the perfect husband, doing the dishes without being asked, bringing home my favorite takeout, tucked in blankets, and soft forehead kisses. But every gesture felt like a bribe. It felt like he was trying to buy my silence, trying to coat the bitter pill of his dishonesty in a layer of sugar so thick I wouldn't notice the taste. But I noticed. I noticed every time he said her name. "Clara, look at the birdie," he'd chirp, pointing out the window. I'd flinch. It was like a physical twitch in my eye. I stopped using her name entirely for a few days. I called her sweetie, bug, baby, little one. I realized I was mourning the word itself. Clara used to taste like honey. Now it tasted like copper. I started wondering if she could sense it. Babies are intuitive, right? Did she feel the way my heart rate spiked when I had to write her name on a preschool application? Did she notice the way I hesitated before calling her in from the yard? I decided I needed a break from the suffocating air of our house, so I took Clara to visit my mom for the weekend. My mom is one of those classic, no-nonsense women who thinks therapy is just paying someone to listen to you complain, but she has a way of cutting through the noise. We were sitting on her back porch, watching Clara chase a butterfly through the hydrangeas, when I finally spilled everything. I told her about the hookup, about Sarah, about the Facebook post, and about the feeling that my life was a recycled script. My mom listened, sipping her iced tea, her eyes fixed on my daughter. When I finally stopped talking, exhausted and on the verge of tears, she didn't hug me. She didn't tell me Mark was a monster. She just looked at me and said, "Emily, do you love that little girl?" "Of course I do, Mom. More than anything." "And do you love Mark?" I hesitated. That was the harder question. I thought I did. I mean, I do, but I don't know who he is right now. "A name is a vessel, Emily," she said, her voice steady. "When Mark first thought of it, maybe it was empty. When he talked about it with Sarah, maybe they tried to fill it with their dreams. But they failed. That vessel stayed empty. It was waiting for the person who would actually carry it. Look at her. Look at Clara." I looked at my daughter. She had fallen down, her little knees stained with grass, but she wasn't crying. She was laughing, pointing at a ladybug on her sleeve. "Is she Sarah's dream?" my mom asked. "Is she that college girl's memory?" "No, she's yours. She's the one who gave that name a heartbeat. You're letting two women who don't even know your daughter's middle name own her identity. Why are you handing them that power?" For a moment, I felt a surge of clarity. My mom was right. I was letting ghosts haunt a living, breathing, beautiful child. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a tiny crack of light in the darkness. I went home that Sunday feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim the name. I practiced saying it under my breath the whole drive back. Clara. Clara. My Clara. But when I walked through the front door, the reality of Mark was waiting for me, and the clarity vanished. He was in the basement, organizing, which was his way of avoiding me when things were tense. I went down to tell him we were home, and I saw he had a few old boxes open, stuff from his college days, things he'd moved from apartment to apartment but never really looked at. I saw a photo sitting on top of a stack of books. It was him and Sarah. They were younger, glowing with that annoying, effortless youth. And on the back of the photo, in his handwriting, the same handwriting that was on our daughter's birth certificate, it said, "For our future, for Clara." The date was from 3 years before he even met me. The childhood favorite lie hit me all over again, fresh and burning. It wasn't just a name he liked. It was a manifesto. He had been carrying that photo around for years. He'd moved it into our house. He'd kept it in a box under the stairs while we raised a child with that very name. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just picked up the photo and walked it over to him. He looked up, his face turning pale the moment he saw what was in my hand. "You said it was a coincidence," I whispered. My voice was dead, devoid of the anger I'd felt before. It was just cold. You said you liked the name since you were 10, but you wrote this for her. You were planning this child with her. And when she left, you just kept the plan and changed the woman? Emily, please, he started, standing up, his hands shaking. That's just an old photo. I forgot it was even in there. It doesn't mean anything. It means you lied to me every single day for the last 3 years, I finally snapped, the volume of my voice echoing off the concrete walls. It means every time we talked about our future, you were just comparing it to the one you already designed. It means I am a placeholder, Mark. I'm the woman who is good enough to fulfill the vision you had with someone else. Do you have any idea how degrading that is? To know that my daughter's name isn't a gift of love, but a leftover from a failed relationship? It's not a leftover, he shouted back, finally losing his temper. I chose to stay with you. I chose to marry you. I chose to have a life with you. Why does a name change any of that? So what if I had the idea before? Most people have ideas for their lives before they meet their partners. Should I have thrown away my favorite name just because I mentioned it to someone else? That's ridiculous. You're looking for reasons to feel like a victim. I'm not a victim, Mark. I'm a wife who thought she had a partner who was honest with her. I threw the photo at him. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. I can't do this anymore. I can't look at her and not see your lies. I can't look at you and not see Sarah. Every time I say her name, I'm going to see this photo. I'm going to see that handwriting. You didn't just give her a name, Mark. You gave her a shadow. I walked upstairs, grabbed a bag, and started throwing things in it. I didn't know where I was going. Back to my mom's? A hotel? It didn't matter. I just needed to be somewhere where the word Clara didn't feel like a death sentence. Mark followed me, pleading, apologizing, circling back to the same tired arguments. But I was done listening. The trust wasn't just broken, it was pulverized. I looked at the nursery door as I walked toward the stairs. My daughter was in there, sleeping, blissfully unaware that her parents' marriage was disintegrating over the very syllables that defined her. I felt a sudden sharp pang of guilt. Was I the one ruining this? Was I the one blowing this out of proportion? Maybe I was just insecure. Maybe I was the crazy one. But then I remembered the look on his face when I showed him the photo. That wasn't the look of a man who had made an innocent mistake. That was the look of a man who had been caught in a long-term, calculated deception. I walked out the front door, the cool night air hitting my face. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Mark standing in the porch light, looking small and defeated. For a split second, I wanted to go back. I wanted to pretend I never saw the photo. I wanted to go back to the lightning bolt on the porch. But you can't go back. Once the lights are turned on, you can't pretend you're still in the dark. I drove for an hour, just circling the city, the tears finally coming in hot, angry waves. I realized that the issue wasn't the name anymore. It wasn't even the ex-girlfriend. It was the fact that I didn't know how to trust my own memories anymore. If that special moment on the porch was a lie, what else was? Was the night he proposed a lie? Was the way he looked at me when I was in labor a lie? I felt like I was living in a house of mirrors, and every time I turned around, I saw a version of Mark I didn't recognize. And in every mirror, there was a little girl named Clara, caught in the middle of a story that wasn't hers to tell. The neon sign of the motel flickered outside the window, casting a rhythmic, buzzing red light across the beige carpet of the room. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, the silence of the room ringing in my ears. Clara was asleep in the portable crib I'd grabbed in a panic, her small thumb tucked into her mouth. She looked so peaceful, so untainted by the storm that had just leveled our home. I watched her, and, for the first time, I felt a strange, chilling distance. It was as if I was looking at a stranger's child. I pulled out my phone, the screen still webbed with cracks. There were 17 missed calls from Mark, dozens of texts. I didn't want to read them, but my thumb moved of its own accord. Emily, please come back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shout. You're overreacting, but I want to make it right. Think about Clara. She needs to be in her own bed. That last one felt like a slap. Think about Clara. That was the weapon he always used. He used her as a shield to protect himself from the consequences of his own choices. Every time I tried to hold him accountable for the lies, he turned it back on me, making me the unstable mother who was putting her daughter's well-being at risk. But wasn't he the one who put her in this position? Wasn't he the one who built her identity on a foundation of sand? I leaned my head back against the headboard and closed my eyes. I started thinking about the hookup from college again, the girl named Clara. Mark had dismissed her as a short thing, a coincidence. But in the context of the photo I'd found, the timeline started to look different. Maybe she wasn't just a girl he slept with. Maybe she was the inspiration. What if he met her, loved her name, and then spent the next decade trying to recreate the feeling she gave him? What if Sarah was just the first attempt at building that shrine, and I was the second? I felt like a character in a movie who realizes they're just a body double for the lead actress. I wasn't the woman Mark loved for who she was. I was the woman who fit the mold he'd carved out before we even met. The weight of the recycled life was crushing. I thought about our first date. We'd gone to a small Italian place, the kind with candlelight and checkered tablecloths. He told me he loved how I laughed. He told me he felt like he'd known me forever. At the time, it felt romantic. Now, it felt ominous. Had he taken Sarah to that same restaurant? Had he told her she felt like home too? I realized then that Mark didn't want a partner. He wanted a set piece. He had a vision of a perfect life. The house with the porch, the golden retriever, the daughter named Clara, and he was just looking for someone to fill the role of wife so he could have it. It didn't matter if it was Sarah or me or someone else. As long as the picture looked right from the outside, he was happy. But I wasn't a set piece. I was a person, and my daughter wasn't a prop in his lifelong drama. I looked at Clara again. Her name. I tried to say it in my head without the baggage, but it was impossible. It was like trying to look at a beautiful painting after someone told you it was a forgery. The brushstrokes were the same, the colors were just as vibrant, but the soul was gone. It was just a copy. I spent the next few hours in a state of hyper-analytical grief. I started scrolling through old photos on my phone. Photos from the day she was born, from her first Christmas, from her second birthday party. In every photo, there was Mark, smiling, holding her, looking like the proudest father in the world. And in every photo, I was there too, looking at him with so much trust and adoration, it made my stomach turn. I felt like I was watching a documentary about a murder I didn't know had happened. I was the victim, and the crime was the slow, methodical theft of my own narrative. Around 3 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, I answered. I didn't say anything. I just waited. Emily? Mark's voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying. Or maybe he was just tired of the game. Are you there? Please tell me you're safe. We're safe, I said, my voice sounding hollow and metallic. I don't know what you want from me, he whispered. I can't change the past. I can't go back and tell 10-year-old Mark to pick a different name. I can't go back and not date Sarah. I gave you everything I have. I gave you my life. Why isn't that enough? Because you didn't give me your life, Mark, I said. You gave me a curated version of it. You gave me the parts you thought I'd like, and you hid the parts that you knew would make me feel like a second choice. You let me build my entire identity as a mother around a lie. It's not a lie, he yelled, his voice cracking. I love that name. I love it because it's beautiful. Why do you have to ruin it? Why do you have to take something good and turn it into something ugly? I didn't turn it ugly, Mark. The truth did. You think you can just bury things and they'll stay dead? But they don't. They rot underground, and eventually, the smell comes up through the floorboards. That's what's happening now. The floorboards are up, and I can't stand the smell anymore. So what now? He asked, his voice filled with a cold, hard desperation. You want a divorce over a name? You want to break up our family because of a ghost? I want to know if you ever loved me, I said, tears finally starting to fall. Or if you just loved the way I looked in the picture you'd already painted. I want to know if, when you look at Clara, you see our daughter, or if you see the girl you tried to have with Sarah. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. But then I heard him take a shaky breath. I see my daughter, he said. But he didn't say it with the conviction I needed. He said it like he was trying to convince himself. I don't believe you, I said. I hung up and turned off the phone. I crawled into the bed next to Clara's crib, but I didn't sleep. I laid there in the dark, watching the red light from the neon sign pulse like a heartbeat. I started to realize that the insecurity I'd been blaming myself for wasn't a character flaw. It was an intuition. It was my subconscious trying to tell me that something was off, that the intimacy I thought we shared was lopsided. I had given him my whole heart, my whole history, my whole future, and he had given me a used dream. I thought about the other Clara again, the college hookup. I wondered where she was now. Was she married? Did she have kids? Did she ever think about the guy who told her her name was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard? I felt a strange sense of kinship with her, and with Sarah. We were all just different versions of the same character in Mark's head. We were all Clara's mother, even if only one of us actually got the job. As the sun began to peek through the thin motel curtains, I realized I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in this motel forever. I couldn't keep running from a name that was literally attached to my child. But I also knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. The lightning bolt was gone. The porch was just a porch. And the man waiting at home was a stranger who knew all my secrets while keeping his own. I looked at my daughter as she started to stir, her little eyes fluttering open. She looked at me and smiled, that pure, unconditional smile that only a child can give. "Mama," she whispered. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She didn't know. She didn't know she was a symbol of her father's inability to let go of the past. She didn't know her name was a battlefield. She just knew she loved me. In that moment, I made a promise to her. I wouldn't let her be a shadow. I wouldn't let her be a recycled dream. If I couldn't change her name, I would change everything else. I would make sure her life was so uniquely hers, so filled with our memories and our truth, that the name would eventually have no choice but to belong to her. But doing that meant I had to face Mark. I had to go back to that house and find out if there was anything left of us that wasn't a hand-me-down. The morning light in the motel room was unforgiving. It highlighted every stain on the carpet and every crack in my resolve. I sat there for a long time, just watching Clara breathe. She was so small, so innocent, and so completely named. That was the thing I kept coming back to. I couldn't unname her. I couldn't scrub the syllables off her skin. She was Clara, and yet the word felt like a brand. I felt like I was looking at my child through a lens that someone else had focused. I finally reached for my phone. It was dead. I plugged it into the wall, and as it buzzed back to life, the notifications started pouring in again. Not just from Mark this time, but from my mother, and even a message from Mark's sister. "Emily, call Mark. He's a mess. Whatever is going on, you guys need to talk." A mess. Everyone always worried about Mark being a mess whenever I stood up for myself. It was the classic dynamic of our marriage. I was the steady one, the anchor, and he was the one who drifted. But I was the one sitting in a motel room with a toddler and a shattered sense of reality. I decided I wouldn't go home yet. I couldn't. I couldn't step back into that house, into that kitchen where the perfect life was staged. I texted Mark, "Meet me at the diner on 4th, noon. Bring Clara's diaper bag. Don't bring flowers." I needed neutral ground. I needed a place where I wasn't wife and he wasn't husband in the context of our shared home. I needed to see him as a man, a separate entity, so I could decide if I even liked that man anymore. I got to the diner early. I picked a booth in the back, far away from the windows. Clara was cranky, sensing my tension, and I spent 20 minutes trying to distract her with a box of crayons the waitress brought over. She drew a big, messy circle in purple wax. "What's that, baby?" I asked. "Mama," she said, pointing at the circle. My heart twisted. I was her circle. I was her world. And I was currently a very broken world. Mark walked in at exactly noon. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was a mess, and he was wearing the same shirt he'd had on the day before. He looked like a man who had been through a war. He spotted us and navigated through the tables, his face a mixture of relief and terror. He sat down across from me, placing the diaper bag on the bench. He didn't try to touch me. He didn't say beautiful. He just sat there, looking at his hands. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I'm not here to forgive you, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here because we have a daughter, and I need to know the truth. No more childhood favorite stories. No more, it's just a name. I want the real reason why you did this." Mark took a deep breath. He looked out the window at the traffic passing by, then back at me. "I was obsessed with it, Emily. Not with Sarah, not with that girl from college. I was obsessed with the idea of Clara." What does that even mean? I grew up in a house that was loud, unpredictable. My parents were always fighting, always on the edge of a divorce that never happened. I used to go to my room and close my eyes and imagine what my life would look like when I was a man. I had this picture in my head. A quiet house, a garden, a wife who laughed, and a daughter named Clara. I don't know where the name came from, maybe a book, like I told you, but it became the symbol of everything I didn't have. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "When I met Sarah, I thought she was the one. I tried to build that vision with her. I talked about the name because I was trying to force the vision into reality, but it didn't work. She wasn't right. The relationship was wrong. When we broke up, I felt like I'd lost the future I'd been dreaming of since I was 8 years old." "So you just waited for the next woman to come along and handed her the same script?" I asked, the bitterness rising in my throat. "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "When I met you, it was different. You were the woman from the vision. You were the one who actually fit. I didn't give you the script because I was lazy, Emily. I gave it to you because I finally felt like it could be true. I didn't tell you about Sarah because I didn't want you to feel like a replacement. I wanted you to feel like the original. I wanted this Clara to be the only Clara that ever mattered." "But she isn't the only one, Mark. That's the point. You gave her a name that was already heavy with someone else's expectations. You gave me a life that was pre-packaged. Don't you see how that makes me feel? Like I'm just a vessel for your childhood fantasy?" "I see it now," he said, his eyes filling with tears. "I see how selfish it was. I thought I was protecting our happiness by keeping the past separate, but I was just building a wall between us. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at him, and for the first time in 48 hours, I didn't feel rage. I just felt a profound, echoing sadness. He wasn't a villain. He was just a man who was so afraid of his own messy reality that he tried to curate a perfect one. He was a man who loved to dream more than he respected the woman who was helping him live it. "I don't know if I can move past this, Mark," I said. "Every time I look at her, I'm going to wonder what else is a vision and what is actually us. I'm going to wonder if you love me or if you just love that I'm the wife who gave you the daughter." "Then let's change it," he said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "Her name. Let's change it." I looked at Clara, who was currently trying to eat a purple crayon. "Mark, she's 2. You can't just change a 2-year-old's name." "Why not?" he asked, his voice gaining strength. "People do it. We can pick a new name, a name that belongs to us, a name that we find today, right now, in this diner. We can tell the family it's for, I don't know, religious reasons, or family honor, or we don't have to tell them anything. If the name is what's standing between us, let's kill the name." I stared at him. It was the most radical thing he'd ever said. It was an admission that the vision was less important than I was. For a split second, I imagined it. Chloe, Alice, Penelope. A fresh start, a clean slate. But as I looked at my daughter, I realized the truth. She wasn't Chloe. She wasn't Alice. She was the little girl who responded to Clara Bear. She was the one who had spent 2 years filling that vessel my mother talked about. If I changed her name now, I wouldn't be reclaiming her. I'd be erasing her. I'd be doing exactly what Mark had done, trying to force a reality to fit my own emotional needs. No, I said, my voice cracking. We aren't changing her name. Mark's face fell. Then what do we do? You're going to go home, I said. You're going to take all those boxes in the basement, the ones with the photos, the ones with the letters, everything from your life before me. And you're going to put them in the car, you're going to take them to a storage unit, or you're going to burn them. I don't care which, but they are not staying in our house. He nodded frantically. Okay, done. What else? We're going to therapy, not marriage counseling where we talk about how to communicate better. I want you in individual therapy to talk about why you think you need to lie to the people you love to keep them around. And I want us to go together to talk about how we build a life that isn't a script. I'll do it, he said. Anything. And Mark? I leaned across the table, making sure he was looking me right in the eye. If I ever find out you've hidden one more thing, one more vision, one more X, one more secret, I'm gone. And I'm taking Clara with me. And she'll never know why her father couldn't just tell the truth. I understand, he whispered. We sat there for a long time after that, the diner noise swirling around us. It wasn't a happy ending. There was no lightning bolt of forgiveness. My heart still felt bruised, and the name Clara still had a bit of a bitter aftertaste. But as I watched Mark reach over and gently take the purple crayon out of Clara's hand, I saw a man who was finally, for the first time, living in the present. We went home that afternoon. The house still felt a little like a museum, but as Mark started carrying those boxes out to the garage, the air started to clear. I went into the nursery and sat on the floor with Clara. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I decided that her name wasn't a gift from him, and it wasn't a leftover from Sarah. It was a challenge. It was a reminder that life is messy, and people are flawed, and the stories we tell ourselves are often just shields against the truth. But the truth is always there, waiting to be seen. I still think about Sarah sometimes. I wonder if she knows that her favorite name is being called out every day in a house 3 towns over. I wonder if she'd be happy for me, or if she'd feel the same pang of theft that I did. But then I realize, it doesn't matter. Sarah isn't in this room. That college girl isn't in this room. Only we are. What would you do in my situation? Would you be able to look at your child the same way? Or would the name always feel like a betrayal? Is it just a name? Or is it the foundation of everything? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've ever dealt with a partner's secret history, how did you move past it? Share your story below, and if you want to hear more stories about the complicated reality of family and relationships, don't forget to subscribe. I looked at my daughter, her eyes bright with a mischief that was entirely her own. Hey, Clara, I whispered. She looked up and grinned, and for the first time in a long time, the name sounded like hers.